Hi everyone, welcome to How to College for First Gens, our podcast where we get together over some coffee to have real conversations about what it's like to be a first generation student before, during, and after college. If you are a new listener, our goal as first gen students is to share knowledge that we've gained along the way, learn a bit more about the experience from other first gens, and hopefully help others going through some of the same challenges we've experienced by sharing lessons learned from fellow first gens. I'm Cody Daly, one of the show's co-hosts, a first generation student living in Chicago, Illinois, whose job as a post-secondary counselor is to help and inspire the next generation of first gens. On today's episode, we will explore the concept of family pressure. For first-generation students, being the first to go to college and graduate is obviously a huge milestone with their family. But with that might be some added pressure. The pressure to achieve something that your family has never done before. And also the pressure to have a level of success that your family may have not felt. Today we discuss that pressure and how students experienced it and reacted to it and managed it within the college setting. We hope you find today's episode to be valuable and helpful if you experience some of the same pressure. Without further ado, let's meet our first guest. We begin today's episode on the pressure that first gens face with a current high school student, Aniya. Hi, Aniya. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. Thanks for having me. So, like you said, my name's Aniya Cooks. I go to Heights High School in Houston, Texas. I'm looking forward to studying either international relations or journalism in college.
You know, it's funny, Aniya. I have a degree in international relations and I started as a journalism minor. So those are both really cool fields. Can you kind of remember when you first identified that you were a first generation student and how did that label make you feel?
It's something that I've always been aware of, not necessarily putting the term first gen student to it, but I always knew that I'd be the first in my family to go to college. And then I think I was in 10th grade when I got into Emerge, and that's like a program that helps first gen students get into college. And once they finally put a label on it, I just kind of felt like this heavy expectation, like, oh, you're like a first generation student. You're the one that has to, make it and graduate through college.
Absolutely. And if you don't mind sharing, what is the Emerge program and in what ways does it help you in terms of getting to college?
Oh, yeah. So, Emerge HISD is basically this program. Like I said, it's geared towards low income, typically people of color, first generation high schoolers. And they start the program in 10th grade, where you apply. And if you get in, you're like typically a high performing student, and they help you build your application to become more competitive. So, they help you with AP classes, dual credit, they help you find internships. They help financially navigating the college application process and the financial aid process. Just the biggest supporters in your corner for operating the college scene.
That's such a great program that helps you in so many areas. And with being the first to go to college in your family, can come some sort of element of pressure. To your knowledge, if you don't mind sharing, what is your family's background in terms of education?
My grandma was the first person to start to go to college back in the 70s, I want to say. And she only made it through her first year before she had to drop out because none of her family supported her going to college. And so she couldn't push herself all the way through on her own, especially in that time. So my mom, after that, same thing. She made it through her first year before she had to drop out because she had me and my siblings at a very young age. So she just wasn't able to juggle having three kids and a college work schedule. And my oldest sister, same thing. She was able to complete one semester of college before she was forced to drop out because she couldn't handle the financial debt that it was putting her in. A lot of the people in my family have tried to go to college and for some reason or another been forced to leave college. And then I have two other older siblings who just barely graduated high school. Like they didn't even consider college as an option. So I'm the first, hopefully, that's actually going to be going through all the way.
I'm struck by your family's history, and thank you for sharing that. With first generation students, it's not just about you getting in, it's about you being successful and finishing, right? There's kind of two elements to having the access as a first gen student to even get in, but then also having some of the skills to finish. You highlighted a few really important topics, family support, life circumstances. You mentioned that your sister, it was because of financial issues, with the debt that she was taking on and the cost of college. You mentioned a few barriers there that kind of kept your family from completing college. But I'm curious, do you think there's any additional barriers that you think affected your family in terms of them not getting to that final stage?
So, like I said, with my grandma, it was just really tough because she went to college back in like the early 70s. And as an African American woman going to college, and like she went to some community college out in the middle of nowhere, Texas. I know she said it was really difficult dealing with all the prejudice against her. And that's one reason why she really felt like she wanted the support of her family, but it wasn't there. And then it's difficult because my mom, nothing in her high school career prepared her for college. Like she didn't have the opportunity for AP classes or IB classes or any kind of like rigorous coursework that would teach her the balance that she needed to be able to juggle life and school. And so that was something that really threw her out of her element, I know, whenever she went to college. Those were some big struggles that they had to deal with that just really held them back from achieving successfully graduating from college.
You mentioned both some educational barriers, but also some societal barriers, what your grandmother had to go through. That makes sense as to why the family support was so needed. Because if you're already feeling isolated or segregated or made to feel alone on your college campus, you're going to need an outlet of support. And typically that would come from home. Looking back at some of their experiences with college, have you heard any members of your family talk openly about regretting not going further in college?
Yeah, for sure. My mom really regrets not being able to finish college, but she knows that she dropped out for the right reasons, which is raising her kids. So she's always just used that to push us forward in furthering our own education as far as we can.
Let's talk a little bit about your family even further, especially like your siblings. You've already mentioned. Do you think your mom held all of your siblings to the same standards in terms of going above and beyond in education and then even maybe going off to college?
Not really, because I have always been, I'm not going to say like naturally smart, but I've never struggled in school, whereas some of my other siblings have. So if, say, my brother or my sister came home with a B plus, they would be like celebrated and there'd be like rewards and stuff. And if I came home with an A, it's just another Tuesday, you know? So it was definitely a different standard for all of us, but my mom always emphasized our own happiness over education. And she always encouraged us to do what we felt like instead of focusing all the way 100% on school. And to her, our mental health was more important than like always having a good grade. So it wasn't like she was constantly on us about, studying every single day and making the highest test scores and getting into the top colleges, Harvard and Yale and Rice. But it was definitely something that was somewhat expected of me. So that was always a big pressure on me more than my other siblings, but the standard definitely was not the same for all of us.
Mentally, how does that manifest itself with you? You know, how do you think you having higher standards from your mom, you having maybe higher expectations or just different expectations, how do you think that made you feel? Do you think it impacted you as a student or as a person at all?
It's kind of odd because I've always been the kind of person that I'd want to do my best. And I don't know if that's so much from the expectations or if that's something intrinsic in me, but it certainly has provided a motivator for me to constantly be on top of my game. And mentally, I'd say she gave me the support, and she still gives me the support that I need in order to achieve those high grades and be the best that I can be. So it's just affected me in pretty positive ways, I'd say, just to always do my best and be my best. And I know how to measure that out with the rest. So it's never pushed me over the edge or anything, just as far as overworking myself and exhausting myself.
It seems like your mom did a really amazing job of really individualizing her support and her expectations and her mindset with each of you. Now let's shift focus to more of you and your relation to college and the concept of college. Can you recount the first time mom even talked to you about college? When was that and how was that experience?
I think I must have been in like the third grade, maybe fourth. And we were driving somewhere around like downtown kind of area, and we passed Rice University. And my mom was like, "Oh, that's Rice." And she started like saying how it's one of the best universities in Texas and how one day I was going to go there. And I just remember being like kind of confused, but it was something that was exciting to me, actually, like seeing the campus and kind of seeing people who may or may not have even been college students, but like grown-ups walking around the campus looking all cool. And I just remember thinking, wow, I'm going to be here one day. That's so cool, you know? And then as I got older, our conversations kind of shifted more seriously, like, okay, which colleges do you want to go to? Why do you want to go there? How feasible is it that you're going to get in? Do you see yourself fitting in there? Stuff like that. And it was still exciting, but now with a big edge of like nerves, you know?
Sounds like you've always been kind of a school person. Always, you probably enjoy learning and, you know, to have conversations about college in the third grade, like that's awesome. And mom probably saw potential in you at such a young age that you could get to those places and especially an amazing university like Rice. And when it comes to college, what sort of expectations does your mom have for you?
Well, she definitely expects me to go to a prestigious university. We've actually thought about this so many times in the past like 6 or 7 months because I know that I could get into a school like Harvard or Yale if I really wanted to, but I don't want to. You know, a lot of the schools that I want to go to are more like liberal and open with their curriculum, like actual open curriculum schools. And so she wants me to push myself to do constantly bigger and better and brighter things. And I'm over here like fluttering around looking at all the different universities and holistically what they can offer me instead of just like classroom rigor. So that's definitely a thing that's come up multiple times as I'm considering the different schools that I'm going to apply to, but I know it's all from a place of love.
Do you think your mom's experience with college and not finishing, and you mentioned she was one that kind of did express regret, do you think that influences her expectations at all?
You know, I think it might a little bit. I'm fairly certain she just doesn't want me to ever have any regrets about where I went or how long it took me to get through my degree. And she wants to make sure that I don't have to go through the same things that she did or even half the stuff that she did. So all of her pushing comes from a place of, okay, I don't want my daughter to ever have to experience or doubt whatever she's doing, like I did.
Where would you say the middle is between mom's expectations and what Aniya wants?
It's so funny you asked that because the only school that we both agree on is Boston University. That's the only college that I want to go to and she wants me to go to. So that's like the perfect middle ground for both of us. And that's just coincidentally my first choice, too. We do have at least a little bit of middle ground.
Absolutely. And you know, that middle ground might even develop as you continue to go through the process. So, continuing on, let's talk about your motivation to go to college. College, you know, the very easy look of intake, outtake. What you get out of college is obviously a degree that'll help you get a job. So, that's one reason why a lot of people go to college. But outside of just getting a job and going into a career, what else has motivated you to apply to college and to go to college?
It's actually funny. I just wrote an essay about this not too long ago. So, there was a very specific instance in my childhood that made me want to like do better for myself and my community. One day, my family and I, we were out at like a grocery store in the middle of nowhere, Texas, and this like huge white guy came up behind us and called us a racial slur. Just the whole family. It was just like my mom and a whole bunch of kids. And whenever we got like we just ran out the store, got back in the car and took off. And I remember being like terrified and everybody else in the car being some degree of terrified or angry. And I like remember thinking to myself, this isn't the world I'm gonna live in when I grow up. It's not gonna be like this. And so throughout all of my like education, I've just thought I need to get to college so that I can make a difference in the world. I need to get to college so I can change this world for the better. And that's something that stuck with me throughout the past, what is it, 10 years now? 11? Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And I can't imagine that moment in your life and what your family had to go through in that moment and that experience. And, you know, I've said a lot that I think that your generation is going to be the generation to save us all because I think there's a lot of great hope from the younger generation. And I think that it's really commendable that you take such a hateful incident from your childhood and you, had to deal with that and manage that. And I'm sure there were many mental health, you know, situations that come up in that area, but you also want to use it to create positive change. So I just want to say that you are amazing and that is really commendable that you want to have that influence on society. And just from talking to you, I know that you can. If you ever doubt yourself in that way, always remember you can.
Thank you. Oh, I'm like tearing up.
You mentioned this earlier in a joking way. You said, you know, all my siblings are always like, when she gets rich after college and becomes famous and is a, you know, whatever, a lawyer, she's going to buy us all, you know, whatever. But in all seriousness, you know, studies show that people who complete college on average do out earn their peers in terms of salary and wage. And this might be a big question for a senior in high school, but do you feel any sort of pressure or sense of responsibility to financially provide for your family in the future?
Yeah, I think that it's just like the way I've always been. If I have something, then I don't see why I wouldn't give at least part of it to my family, especially if I have like an excess because I don't plan on like having kids or like a whole bunch of assets in the future. So if I did end up making a lot of money and had excess, I don't see why I wouldn't give it to my family or pour it back into the community. So it's not something that they expect me to do, just to do it or because they feel like they deserve it, but it's just a natural thing that I feel like I should.
Anaya, I'm curious your thought on this. We've talked about, the pressure that first gens faced, and we've talked about your family, the higher expectations for you. Some of your family have done a year or so in college but never finished. So kind of being the first to actually go through all the way. How do you think the emphasis on success in college is different for first gen students as opposed to students whose parents did complete college?
Well, I think to me, it's kind of a double edged sword because whenever you have parents that have gone to college and gotten through it, there's kind of an expectation like, okay, well, your parents did it. And obviously, you must come from somewhere that's like well off and you had a good opportunity for education. So why shouldn't you or why can't you? Even though they do have like better opportunities and they typically will have an easier time getting into college, whereas a first gen student has the pressure to succeed because they're expected to be the ones to make it out and do something with the family name and make their parents proud, make their siblings proud, even though people recognize that it's a lot harder to do when you're a first generation student. So it's it's complicated because there's still pressure when it comes to students who aren't first generation, but it's an entirely different kind of pressure. And first generation students typically won't understand like the struggle of having expectation placed on you or having like a legacy kind of placed on you. Whereas students who have had parents that have gone to college will never understand how hard it is for fresh blood to be coming into the college scene.
As we close this section of the interview, I'm curious, what tips do you have for first gen students who may be experiencing stress or anxiety or lots of pressure from their family or for their family when it comes to going off to college?
First thing I'd say is I know it can be difficult, but sometimes you just have to know when to draw boundaries with your family about putting pressure on you. Like, you can say, I know you want me to go to college and I know you want me to get into a good school, but you talking to me about it every single day and putting all this pressure onto me is counterintuitive to me actually being able to put myself in a position where I'm healthy and stable enough to go to college. So, just drawing boundaries with your family can help a lot with any kind of pressure or stress or anxiety. And then I'm not going to say learning when to tune them out, but learning when to let go of any unnecessary advice or unnecessary pressure on you is a really big thing that I had to learn because they're always going to want the best for you, but they're not always going to know how to give you their best. And that's just something that you're both going to have to figure out, but you can't let it take an unnecessary mental toll on you because at the end of the day, you're the one that's going to be going to college, not them. And you're going to want to make sure that you're in your best state to be able to do that.
And then, Anaya, to close, I would just love to hear what are your plans for senior year of high school and college?
Yeah, so senior year, I'm only taking 5 classes and then I'm going to be working to save up for college because I know for sure I'm going out of state and I'm going to need money in my savings account to help me keep afloat. But like I said, my first choice is Boston University. I'm also applying to like University of Southern California. University of Southern California. I'm applying to Pitzer. I think there's like 15 different colleges on my list that I'm applying to. And I'm just, I'm excited about the application process, actually. I know it's going to be a completely different story when I start getting the acceptance or rejected letters in the mail. But for right now, I'm pumped. I'm excited to do this.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Aniya, for being here and for sharing your story. We greatly appreciate it, and we know that our audience will value it, and now they will definitely know how to college.
Thank you for having me.
We continue today's discussion on family pressure with a current college student, Michael. Hi, Michael. How are you?
I'm good. How about yourself?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you so much for being on our episode today. We're super excited to have you speak to family pressure as it relates to first gens. But before we go there, I'd love to have you introduce yourself to our audience.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Michael Martinez. I'm a Latinx student. I currently attend Concordia University. At the moment, I'm currently a junior pursuing my bachelor's in HR management.
That's awesome. And Michael, you are a first generation student. And I'm curious, when did you first realize that you were a first generation student? And how did that label or identity make you feel?
Yeah, well, I didn't really know that much understanding of first generation students when I was in high school. When I first learned I was a first generation student, I actually was a freshman in college. In the university, I hear a lot of opportunities about being a first gen student scholarships. When I found out I was labeled as a first generation student, obviously I did my own personal research and realized I do have an older sibling, Jonathan, which he is 26 at the moment. He didn't have the opportunity to go to college. I fortunately did have the opportunity to go to college. When I found out I was labeled like that, it made me feel good, but in a sense, it kind of did make me feel some sort of way as in left out or in a specific group. I kind of saw it also as a negative, but also as a positive, more for the fact that there's more resources available to me, which is a great thing, especially when it comes to scholarships or opportunities with student support services on my campus specifically. The negatives that I did see being labeled as a first generation student was more of the labeling, being labeled as a first generation. I kind of saw it as a bad thing, which, yes, in my opinion, many people do see it as a positive thing for being the first in their family. And that's something that really motivates me to this day.
If you don't mind, Michael, I'd love to kind of get to know your family with regards to the world of education. To your knowledge, what is your family's background in terms of education?
Well, to start off, my parents are immigrants from Mexico. They immigrated here before I was born. They really don't have that much education. My dad really, I think, stopped going to school when he was in fifth grade, obviously for working reasons. My mother did have a chance to go to high school, but didn't finish in Mexico, where she is from. Being the first to go to college or university specifically was a lot of pressure on myself without even me knowing.
Do your parents or relatives even ever talk about like why they didn't go further in their education, or what challenges or barriers may have been in the way from them going on to further education in Mexico?
I've actually had this conversation a lot with my parents and other family members. The main reason I think during their era, it was not norm to go to school, especially for women in Mexico. It was more specifically for them to stay home, take care of the family, any younger siblings that he did have. I know my dad specifically went into work very early, especially to help with my family, their family business. And every time I speak with one of my aunts, one of my uncles, they all have almost similar stories. I think now with the new generation, specifically my years, which I was born in '99, we really have a perception when we have kids that we would like them to continue, their education, which in my personal opinion, I would love my future kids to continue the education.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that you bring up a really great topic around like the cultural norms around certain things. At that time, it was not the norm for you, like you said, for women to pursue a further education, and, even your father choosing work. So I think that's always something for us to keep in mind. In terms of where they reached their education while they were in school, do you think that impacted what types of jobs they could pursue?
I would think yes and no. Yes, for the fact, again, I think now specifically, it's hard to get a job without a bachelor's degree. But I think in their era, it was really not seen that much. My father, he is manager at a production facility, and he makes a good, well living for himself. My mom currently is a stay-home mom for me and my brother, and as well as for my father. But I think it really goes on the era, specifically for ourselves. If I don't get a bachelor's degree, it's going to be very hard for me to find a well-paying job to satisfy my needs. And if I do find a job like that, I have to climb the ladder. I think if them having a bachelor's degree in that time, it would have really built them up for success in the future.
Have your parents ever expressed any sort of regret about not going further in their education?
From my knowledge, no. I know I've had my father talk about sometimes he has wished he would go to high school just to have that experience. Again, I'm not sure what the experience is compared to my experience. For the fact, again, we're talking about two different eras here. But I know if my father had expressed that he wished he might would have continued. Maybe he would have gone in a different path. I know high school specifically, changes your mind a little bit here and there. I would hope my father would have wanted to do that in the future.
Well, continuing on through the discussion of your family, I would love to kind of explore your family's educational background even further. Growing up, what sort of importance did they put on getting an education?
My family is very high on my education as well as my brother's education. My brother has went back to do his associates and as well as currently doing a certificate. A lot of my friends are Latinx students. A lot of Latinx friends, they always, we always have the same stories as our parents. They want that diploma on the wall, from their students to know that they came here for a reason to the United States, that they didn't just come here to just live a life and have their kids, growing up without a degree. I know my parents put a big emphasis on me and my brother to get our diplomas so they could one day hang it up on their wall. And I hope when I do finish my bachelor's degree, I will be more than happy to give them my degree, because this is not my degree is not just for myself, it's as well for them. So there was really not I'm not gonna go to school for a sense. It was more of I gotta do this for both of us, more for that pressure.
Yeah, and I think that's such a relatable experience of earning it not just for yourself, but for your entire family. And I think that is super powerful, super meaningful. It's a lot of what we as first-gen students have at the forefront of our minds, but it can also be very stress-inducing and a lot of pressure, which we'll talk about as we go further. But that's a very relatable piece that you mentioned siblings. So growing up, do you think that your parents held the same standard for you and your brother when it came to education and college?
I would say yes and no. My brother, since he is older than me, he was 3 years older than me, of Banton School. My brother did graduate valedictorian at Lane Tech High School in Chicago. So there was always that pressure on me and that standard that I have to do the same. To share something personal, it got to a point where I really felt the stress, and the pressure of trying to match him, my parents trying to compare me and to family members to myself. And it was kind of, stress inducing. That pressure and that stress, I unfortunately actually dropped out of high school for a couple weeks. I fortunately did go back and finish, but it just got to the point where I just, it felt so much pressure trying to live up to a standard that it just wasn't for me at that moment.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. And I think that's such an interesting dynamic of really sometimes not only as a first gen student doing things that have never been done in your family before, then to feel that you have to live up to a certain standard that maybe your older sibling already, achieved. That adds even further pressure. So it's not even just going places that you've never gone before, but it's going places that you've never gone to before the way your sibling did it. When we talk about, family pressure and the importance of education and the importance of college, one of the things I always think about is those big educational milestones. So we're talking about high school graduation, college acceptance, moving into college, things like that. How did your family feel during those big life educational milestones for you and your brother? And how did they kind of react in those moments?
Yeah, so to start off with my brother, they're very excited when he graduated with his associates. It was something, nobody in my family has done. I didn't go for my associates, I went straight to my bachelor's. They're very excited more for the fact that, again, like I mentioned, they came to this country specifically for one reason, and to give me and my brother a better life. Fortunately, we have done a great job of. I think for me, when I graduated high school, it was a bigger milestone for the fact that, again, like I mentioned, I did drop out of high school, and I didn't think about going back until I did. And it was just a big accomplishment because my father, he believed in me, and he always told me that he did believe in me, that I could do great things. I just had to put my mind to it. And when I did graduate high school, it was a big moment, not just for myself, but for my family, that they knew what I was capable of. And that kind of helped me, motivated me to, when I did go to college, to start. I think another great moment of one of my accomplishments is, I think when I finished my first semester of college and had a 4.0. I love to share, my grades with my family, to let them know how I'm doing. They tell me, one step at the way, one semester at a time. Next thing you know, 1 year at a time. And next thing you know, I'll have my bachelor's.
Hypothetically, how do you think your life would have been different if you never went back to high school?
I think about this a lot, especially, my first couple semesters in college. I think my life would have been drastically different, specifically where I am emotionally, physically, more for the fact that I've met some great people in college that helped me out in the way to become who I am today. Talking back to your question, when it came to high school, I just think that where I'll be at in life wouldn't be possible. I wish I could give you detail, but in the overall picture, I don't think I would be at where I'd be at right now. I've been very fortunate to have amazing jobs, amazing internships, meet amazing people, and that has helped me become the person I am today. I don't think I would be the person if it wasn't for maybe finishing high school, quote unquote. I could tell you, obviously I currently still work, part-time job. I just think overall my life actually would be a whole 360.
Sounds like a cliche, but education truly opens so many doors for people, especially for first gen students. And so you taking that moment and going back really changed your life trajectory on completing high school, going on. Now you're in college. Obviously, if you hadn't completed high school, you would have had to earn a high school equivalency to then go to college.
Yeah, I could add. I do have high school friends, colleagues now that I don't consider friends since we fell off. I do have a couple people that I knew from high school that some that didn't finish, high school and living their life, and I know people that have finished high school didn't go to higher education and living their both life. And there's nothing wrong with that. Everybody takes their own path, and obviously everybody has that opportunity to really go back to school. But I could imagine their life and my life if I took one of those paths. And again, looking back at it, if I could tell myself or my younger self and my future children is that higher education is important. Higher education has really opened a lot of doors and a lot of experiences that I wouldn't experience as a first generation student.
Yeah, and I think that's so important that you stress that it's really up to what that person has in mind and what their goal is, because absolutely there are students who finish high school and either get good paying jobs or maybe go to trade schools or certain things and still get a lot out of life. It sounded like even when you left for those couple weeks that you kind of weren't done with education. Would you say it was more of the stress of living up to the expectations as opposed to not liking school? Would you agree that that's kind of where your decision was?
100%. For me in high school, I actually was involved in sports a lot, and I had scholarships to play in sports for different schools. And unfortunately, I gave them up because I wanted to be away from that pressure. Trying to decide a school to go to, trying to decide this and that. And throughout those weeks that I did drop out, unfortunately losing these scholarships and that, it gave me a sense of relief that I didn't have to deal with the pressure. But again, like you mentioned, education didn't leave my mind at all. I think when I dropped out, again, talk about family pressures, it kind of did put me in a stage of depression, more for the fact that I felt the pressure of gotta satisfy my parents, and not thinking about myself.
Thank you for opening up about kind of some of those feelings surrounding how the pressure to achieve certain things and to go to college and be successful kind of brought you towards some depressive moments. How do you think those moments, how did those play out in your mind? What sort of things did you experience that made you realize that you were depressed at the time? And were you able to open up to your parents about your feelings at that time?
At that time, yes and no. I did express to my parents that I did feel compared to my brother, especially after I dropped out. I spoken to them saying that I really felt that they were expecting the same thing from me. I obviously had a different high school experience than he did. We went to both different high schools, which really kind of played out differently. I went to a primarily Hispanic school. My brother went to a primarily Caucasian school. So it was really, difficult to see the experiences I seen and he seen. With that being said, it was just, I think, again, talking about culture, men are not supposed to talk about their feelings, which I 100% obviously disagree with, looking back at it now. And it goes again back to the word, quote unquote, machismo. Looking back at it, I wish I could, the way I express myself now, I wish I could express to my parents. But, looking back at it, for my future children, I don't want them to feel that they can't speak to me, and I really wish a lot more people, and I emphasize that a lot with panels I've done in the past, that if you can't speak to your parents, there's also opportunities on counselors you could speak to. My high school counselors weren't as good as my college counselors, so I really try to emphasize that people have trouble speaking how they feel to their parents.
If you can go back to that time, that 2-week period of time when you did leave high school, what was the top thought that like motivated you to go back?
Yeah, I think my main thought is that I didn't want to be a statistic. I didn't want to be another Latinx student that couldn't finish and be, just another label. Besides that, my parents gave me the space I needed to decide what I really wanted, which was a big thought in my mind, and what I really wanted. I know there was a bunch of schools after I dropped out I applied to that I didn't get a chance to be accepted. And then after I went back to high school, the schools reaccepted me. It made me realize this might be my one shot to go to school. Those schools that didn't accept me, they didn't accept me, and that one school that did accept me, I felt like that was kind of like a wake-up call for myself, knowing I could go to a city college, but this might be the best thing for me. And fortunately, 4 years later, it was one of the best choices I've made.
If you don't mind me going back, you've mentioned a couple times your brother and his success in high school, and then I believe even you said earning his associate's degree. I'm curious, it sounds like your brother didn't go beyond that associate's degree. If he didn't, was it because he found employment with his associate's degree, or what sort of challenges or barriers were in place that led him to not pursue a further education outside of the associates?
Yeah, it's great that you asked that question because it goes back to the topic of pressure, of family pressures. During quarantine, my brother was actually attending university. When the pandemic first started, my mom had to go out of state. She had to go to Mexico for some personal matters. My brother was taking care of like finances, paying bills, this and that for my parents while they were away. And I didn't know until later December of 2020 that my brother actually dropped out of university. And speaking to my mom or speaking to him about it, it was because he just felt that family pressure of, okay, right now I just can't do it because of family problems, of family issues, or just personally. I know for my brother specifically, he had trouble finding a program that he liked specifically for his major. Currently, like I mentioned, he finished his associates and currently doing a certificate in cybersecurity, which is his route. I know my brother has expressed interest in going back and finishing, but for the meantime, again, like I mentioned, back to the topic of family pressures, he just felt that pressure that time to not finish.
Yeah, and we've already talked about this previously in this episode with another guest, but I really think that education is an investment, and not only in terms of money, but also in terms of time and energy. And I think because of that, oftentimes when it comes to going to college and succeeding in college, it has to be the right time. And so that's why whenever people are wondering, we have sometimes, I used to work at a community college, we would have sometimes individuals later in life, maybe in their 40s, their 50s, their 60s, going to college. And many people would say, why are they going to college now? But it might have not been the time earlier. And as you mentioned, your brother had so much on his plate. So I can totally see why it would be it's truly hard to balance both so much of that family responsibility with also being a full-time college student. That would be a huge course load to take.
Yeah, of course. And if I could add on to that, I think also pretty much every family, but I think a lot in Latinx family, that older sibling always has to take the reins when it comes to it. Fortunately, my parents never asked me to do anything. I was still going to school, online or in person when it was still that transition. Like I mentioned, it was when I started noticing my brother not going to school and this and that, asking questions. He says class got canceled. And, again, it goes back to that norm of the older sibling, takes the reign. And looking back at it, I wish I was there to support, because I think looking back at, I think higher education, again, I agree that it's an investment for the long run. And unfortunately, I wish I could have helped them out during that period of time.
And, looking back, outside of going and getting a job, what motivated you to pursue college and to actually go to college?
Yeah, what motivated me was, kind of cliche an answer, but myself, I thought I wanted to see what I could do. I wanted that college experience more for the fact I wanted to learn about fraternities. I wanted to learn about networking. I wanted to learn about this and that. And I think as everybody, I wanted to make as much money as possible early, early in my life, so I could be settled by the time I'm 50, 60 years old, if I get to that age, and just be financially stable for myself. I don't want to, I've seen my parents struggle when it comes to finances, and I want to give back to my parents. I want to help them, when I do get a good paying job, I want to help them, let my parents know they don't have to work. I'm more than happy to help provide for them, and just overall my whole family in general.
Yeah, and I find that wanting to do better and to support your family, I think that is something that drives a lot of people in the work that we do in college. And how do you think the emphasis on having success in college is different for first gen students as opposed to classmates whose families did go to college?
I think individually there is a sense of success. You know, I'm obviously every time I do have a great semester and finishing an education, I feel a sense of pride. You know, I would hope that regardless of classification as a first gen or not first gen, everybody still feels that same sense of success. I know obviously for Latinx students specifically, they do feel more of a sense of success for the fact that again, like I mentioned, our parents come here for a reason, is to give us a better life. And we do our best to give back to our parents. And I hope that many students do feel like that. I know a lot of my friends and a lot of close friends I have that are in college, that are first generation Latinx students, they do feel that sense of pride and success every time they have a huge milestone where they get closer to the degree.
And what are some tips that you have for other first gens who may experience things like stress and anxiety or depression around that idea of pressure when it comes to college?
When it comes to college, especially I think in the senior year, that's where a lot of people get senioritis, quote unquote, and feel that pressure of trying to make a decision, trying to find a school, apply for scholarship, apply for financial aid, this and that, this and that. I think, what I can tell myself back then is just relax. There's people there to help you and assist you for a reason. There's counselors to help you every step of the way. I know a lot of people like myself felt the pressure of, man, why do I got to pick a school now? Why can't I do it later? This and that. And obviously the reasons are because schools get filled up. And, with that being said, I think it's good sometimes to have that pressure because you see how much you really want it and how much you really desire it. I think, like I mentioned, if whoever decides to go to college, if you decide to go a year later before you right after high school, it's still great. It's still an accomplishment. I've had a chance to speak to students, high school students, incoming freshman students on panels, and I always tell them that college is not a race. It's a journey that you take. If it means you got to take a semester or a year off, it's okay. It's not a race. Not everybody gets there at the same time. We might get at the same place, but everybody's journey is different.
Well, thank you so much, Michael. This was such a great discussion and chat about family pressure. We totally thank you so much for sharing your insight and your experiences with our audience.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the time you took out to hopefully help somebody.
We finished today's conversation on the pressures that first gens face with a post-college graduate, Miguel. Hi, Miguel. How are you?
Hi, Cody. I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. We're super excited to have you share your experience with our audience. Today we're here to talk about the pressures that first gens face while going to college and even in workforce and succeeding in general. But before we get to that topic, I'd love to have you introduce yourself to our audience.
Hi, my name is Miguel Ramirez. I currently reside in Houston, Texas. I'm 23 years old. I am a Mexican American. And I went to the University of Houston to study history with a minor in business foundations in hopes to become a history teacher.
Miguel, you are a first-generation college graduate. When did you discover that you were considered a first-generation college student, and how did that identity make you feel?
I guess I always kind of knew. My family came from Mexico and El Salvador, respectively, and they didn't even finish middle school for the most part. So I've always known since the beginning, pretty much of what I could remember and experiencing all that, I was first generation to even go and finish high school. So that was, from the beginning, very, very stressful, but also really rewarding to understand the implications of why my family came to the United States and kind of helping set the yellow brick road, if you will, for the next generation of my family members.
So many young students, they always want to go even further than their parents did. And really the parents want that as well. Those opportunities to go to those uncharted territories such as college or different professions. So that's really cool that you've had that experience. Miguel, so today we're here to talk about pressure. And that can be from family, that can be from society, that could even be from the system of what college is. But to get started, you've already kind of alluded to your family's background in the world of education. Do you think that had an impact, and do you think they feel that it had an impact on what careers were available to them?
I think as far as in the time that they spent in their countries, I think so. Just mainly because they come from very poor and rural communities. And so without education or without a proper guidance, there was no way for them to move up unless they went into the city or went into the United States. Those were honestly the only two options they had. So for them, it was a no-brainer. They didn't want to be stuck and continue to do what their families did for a long time. And I think that kind of speaks volumes to how it is today. A lot of our families work 40 hours, 9 to 5. And as you see, the generations that come and go, they don't want to be stuck to that 9 to 5 label. They don't, want to work 40 hours a week, or they're trying to figure out what can I do and how do I get there to be better than what I've seen at home from my family, or, things like that.
We've talked about your family's educational background. Now let's talk about how you and how your siblings experience that. So how much did your family emphasize education growing up when you were in school?
So I think for me in particular, me and my sister, I have one sibling. She's an older sister, and she's about 10 months older than me. But I was able to start school early, so me and her were always in the same grade, mainly because my mom wanted, if we were to go to college, she would like to pay it off one time, just kind of do it and just get it over with. But I think that was always the plan from the beginning. My parents came to this country to kind of give us a better life and give us better opportunity than what they did. And that was always their goal. And so for us, we knew that as you grow up, they kind of tell you, oh, we came to this country for this, for that. You kind of understand why they came here. And so from the beginning, we knew, okay, well, maybe if we didn't go to school or did well in school, they would be disappointed and stuff. So definitely from a young age, we understood what our job was as far as kind of furthering the family lineage and trying to put them in a better spot than even what we were.
Do you think your parents held you and your older sister to the same standards when it came to academics or aspirations of college?
I think they held us equally in the same standard as far as, within the home. I feel like they were a little more lenient as I've seen maybe my peers, because, for instance, my mom and my dad, they would check on our grades and, they would make sure that, they were okay, but they were never the ones that to tell us like, hey, you can't go outside and play, soccer, which is what I liked to do when I was younger. You have to stay in and study today because you had a bad grade in this class. They were very transparent with us in saying, hey, as you grow up, you're going to have to realize that time allocation is everything. And if you are going to make a decision to go outside and play, you better have your things in school, in check. And so they gave us a lot of freedom to kind of make mistakes and to understand that this world is not always going to hold your hand. And so I think in that aspect, it was kind of some pressure to always know what's going on in your life rather than, oh, I'm just in the moment and doing this, or whatever my friends are doing, I'm doing. But it also really helped us shape the way that we were grown and kind of ready us for the real world, just like, middle school does for high school and high school does for college.
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating that your parents, like you said, did not necessarily, they weren't holding your hand through everything and kind of having you experience things. I think that hand holding can have some really harsh negative consequences. A lot of students, when they go off to college, first gen or not, college is that first time where you don't need mom and dad's signature for a permission slip. And so it's kind of like, it's almost as if your parents helped give you independence early so that you weren't learning it as you go in college, which I think is really beneficial. And probably, I would say, I don't know if you would agree, but it probably helped you get acclimated to college life at some point.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I think that the ability to kind of pick and choose what your priorities were, and understanding that, kind of treating school as work now, understanding that I have to get things done in order to continue to be where I'm at, but I also can have time to relax, have fun, have a social life. And I think honestly that helped me more than anything else I can think of in my head, is the ability to have that freedom and the ability to make those decisions on my own from as far as I can remember. And my parents always supported us, and they told us, that for every action, you do have consequences. So understand that if you do go outside, if you are playing on your video games, if you are talking up all night, you are going to be tired in the morning. You have a big test tomorrow, and they kind of talk to us but not necessarily made that decision for us, but made us understand that, there are consequences and we have to think further down the line rather than just make a permanent decision on temporary feelings per se.
So you've already talked about how your family really emphasized college and really emphasized furthering the education, getting even further than they did. Do you remember the first time that you remember hearing your parents talk about college or emphasizing that to you or your older sister?
I think that it was around my freshman to sophomore year of high school was when they really started to kind of sit down and say, hey, what are your plans after high school? Are you looking to get into, maybe a blue collar job? Are you thinking about going to college? Kind of pushing it towards me, trying to get us to make that decision without telling us to go, which is what, their whole MO was. I think it was around then, my freshman, sophomore year, they would tell us, hey, high school is really what's going to determine whether you're going to go to a good school or even if you're going to have the opportunity to go to school. So if you are, going to buckle down and try to do something for yourself or for our family, and now's the time to kind of start thinking about those decisions. And so right around freshman year, sophomore year was really when they started to kind of motivate us to keep doing well and kind of push ourselves to do better than what they had.
Do you remember, navigating high school and going through high school? In what ways did your parents and your family either motivate you and or support you in the college process?
I think for me personally, they really just motivated me by allowing me to make mistakes and, how do I say, just kind of live high school day by day. They weren't very strict as far as, oh, you need to be home by here, which is honestly a lot different than I can say for my peers and for most first generation college students or first generation minority students as well. A lot of their families are super strict as far as, oh, you have to be home by this time. You have to have this done by here, this chore done by there. They really motivated me by showing me that this is what life could be. The freedom, having the ability to do what you need to do at any time, moment in time. That really motivated me to go to college because for me, I was always, oh my God, this life is great. I can't wait to have, the ability to go to class, the ability to go play soccer if I wanted to, join an internship, join rec leagues, do stuff like that, but all with the people around me, all my friends and who I considered, an extended family as well. So it really motivated me by just telling me, hey, this is what it could be like, except you have your own money and you can, do the things that you want to do. So that was really motivating for me. It's just, hearing their stories about what they went through and knowing that if I did go to college and kind of pursue an education and do things the right way, I could also have that and more. And so that really motivated me just to kind of see their, where they started and where they're at now and kind of understand that I'm, a step above them as far as starting. So let me see how far I can take this myself. And then, maybe my kids will start higher than I did and maybe they'll take us further, And so that's kind of just the hopes and aspirations of it all at the end of the day.
It's such a great way to look at it because I think that's probably one of the most effective motivators is the end goal. Like we always have the end goal of finishing college and what will that give me? Will it give me financially? Will it give me a better work-life balance? Will it give me, certain benefit? And for you to be able to experience small elements of that almost as like a preview to what life could be with a college degree, that had to paint a much clearer, realistic picture in your mind.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think that college and higher education for my families was so out of reach for them that they didn't even think about it. For them, it was either I'm going to the city, I'm going to the United States, or I'm going to stay here and work on the farm. And for me, it's so different. But because my family is, financially able to support me in those ways, I started kind of higher than what they're pretty much ending at. So for me, it's such a big motivator to see like, wow, my parents really came from almost nothing and they got to where they're at now. Like, why wouldn't I want to kind of continue that and use their life experiences as motivation to me and just say, wow, I look at my parents as, I hold my parents in such high regard. I want my kids to look at me and say the same things. And maybe necessarily I didn't come from, a farm in Mexico or anything like that. But, my dad went to college and he was the first one in our family to go. And I think that's great. And maybe they're motivated to go even further and pursue whatever they want and, have fun with it and understand that that's where our family comes from and, kind of just show our tree as it goes on.
So another really interesting dynamic, I think, especially for first generation students, is the celebration of reaching these milestones. And so, for these families, to some families, a high school graduation might be, okay, it's high school graduation, or even a college graduation might be, okay, it's a college graduation. But for our families, for first generation families, these are things we've never even been to before, And so can you talk about any moments or vivid memories about how your family experienced those big educational milestones?
I can remember a specific story where this was for my high school graduation. And in our high school, we had about 600 to 700 seniors in our class. So it was it wasn't a small class by any means. So being at that graduation ceremony was pretty long. But I remember, and my last name is Ramirez. So being R, it's kind of towards the back. I remember kind of looking up in the crowd and like trying to look for my family, and I couldn't really find them. And so I was like, oh man, I hope they made it on time. Or I hope they, had the right address, and I couldn't pull out my phone or anything. So, right around when the beginning of the R started coming, I started getting nervous. Like, man, I hope they're here. Like, I really want to see them and things like that. And I remember when my name gets called up, all I hear is this huge scream from the left corner of the stadium, this huge scream with, the Mexican flag. And then there was 40 of them. That's my whole family that I could, think of here in the United States. 40 of them were there just to support me and show me that, hey, you did it and we're here and we see you. We understand the struggle of what you went through and stuff. And all of that was such a huge relief just to kind of see wow, this was worth something. It's not just a piece of paper. This is a milestone in our family. This is now the standard. And I think that really kind of pushed me to even try to finish college. One thing is to go, but for me, I was like, okay, well, maybe if I go and I try maybe 1 or 2 semesters, but that was when I saw that, I was like, you know what, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to finish because I need to see this again, but I need to see this with more people, with all our new little cousins and, a bigger family. And I need to see it. That was such a motivating factor for me too, to see that and kind of experience that firsthand. It's honestly a feeling I can't really explain.
Let's talk about entering college, because that's a big moment for a lot of first-gen students and first-gen families. Can you talk about your college experience entering or that transition from high school to college and how your family reacted?
I have actually always lived in Houston, Texas. So I decided that I think the most comfortable place for me to be would be Houston, Texas, because I feel if I'm going to go off into this new journey and with all new places, all new experiences, I need to have something there to anchor me down. And I really used my family in that because, like I said, this is a new experience for me and for our family. Leading up to college, it was kind of surreal. It wasn't really registering in anybody's head that I would be leaving, and that even though I would be 30, 45 minutes away, I would still be leaving the house, because that was something that almost nobody did, was leaving the house at such a young age. Going to orientation, it kind of set in this is really going to be my home for the next, 4 years or however long I'm here. That's kind of overwhelming. I see all the same buildings as far as downtown Houston and the area around it. And I see the same buildings. I see my same friends and everything, but it's just me now. It's not my mom asking me what I want for dinner. It's not my dad asking me, hey, do you want to go outside and play soccer? Do you want to go fishing? It's just me now. And I think that transition is so important for students' development into the real world, but also parents and sons or daughters' relationship. That's such a big, vital transition that both of y'all are going through. for me, it was really important that I communicated with my family as much as I could about the new things that I was doing, the new things that I was seeing, because I know they weren't able to do it, and I know they could if they would, or they would if they could have. And so for me to be able to share those experiences, I know they were so proud. I know that it was just as much ecstasy for them as it was for me, because they can have the feeling of warmth that they were able to bring me to that. And so why would I stop there? Treated it as if I was still there. I would still call my mom and my dad, as much as I could, and say, hey, I cooked by myself for the first time. This is crazy, and even those simple tasks that seem kind of trivial, it was great to do that by myself and tell them, wow, like I really feel like I'm an adult now. Even though I'm 18, 19, I feel like I can do this. And step by step, you kind of start getting your footing and all of that. But as far as moving in, it was just very emotional, very overwhelming for everybody. This is a time that, even though I am 30, 45 minutes away, the baby is not going to be at home, And so it's so very emotional and overwhelming, but really rewarding to just kind of sit there in your dorm room and kind of take a breath and say, I'm here. I made it. I'm in this moment. I appreciate everything that got me to this moment, and I know my family has, and I'm not going to, let this slip away from me. Those big events turn into motivating factors as well. Those first times turn into, oh my God, I can't wait till I do this. I can't wait until I do that. Now that I'm here, I can't wait to do this. And it's just becomes a slippery slope into success really after that. So just really take it day by day with your family, with your friends. They're sharing the same experiences as you are. And if they're not, help them. Let them feel what you're feeling. And honestly, it feels way better to do that than to just kind of do things yourself and feel like I am alienated and I am alone, because that's almost never the case.
Additionally, did your family ever encourage you to specifically look at certain careers or majors? Was there any sort of expectation there academically?
Yes, 100%. My family, they were very excited for me to go to college. They loved, the idea that I was going to college, but they did put this pressure on me that if you are going to go to college, we kind of want it to be, for lack of better words, worth it. Something that's held on a high pedestal nowadays. And so that pressure was definitely put on me by them to kind of pick either the business school or the school of medicine, maybe a law degree. Those are the jobs that they talked about, because they would love to see a lawyer in the family. They would love to see a doctor, and not necessarily because of what they do, but it's just because the status they hold. And I don't necessarily blame them, because of course you have to remember where your parents come from. They come from a place where status is everything, where status will will be the deciding factor of whether or not you're going to make it in this life, or whether you're just going to stay where your family has been at. I didn't necessarily resent them for that. I kind of had to take a step back and say, okay, I have to see why they're saying this. That's the main component of it, is why they're saying this. But for me, at the end of the day, it was always going to be, okay, son, you can do what makes you happy, but I hope being a doctor makes you happy. I hope being a lawyer makes you happy. So that was the pressure that they put on me for those specific majors or careers.
Finishing up here, I'm curious. Like I've already talked about, college is a lot in its own. But then to live up to the pressure or the expectations of making your family proud, that can be, like you said, weight on top of weight on top of weight. Looking back at your college experience, can you talk about a challenge or something you had to overcome? And honestly, what kept you going in that moment?
Fear is such a great motivator. And what I mean by that, and especially in college, is even though that my parents, you might have told me, hey, all we want you to do is get there. Maybe 1 or 2 semesters would be enough or too much, overwhelming. We don't know. We've never been there. So just get there and then we'll go day by day. Even though that's what they told me, in my head, it was more than just about getting there. It was 100%, we want you to get there and we want you to graduate. And that was always the goal for them. Even though that was maybe not what they said, that was definitely the feeling that it gave me. And fear of honestly disappointing my family and my friends was a really big motivator, believe it or not. And understanding that that was my main fear, I could kind of turn that around and use that as motivation and saying, okay, yeah, I don't want to fail. So what do I need to do from here on out to kind of ensure that I don't and that I become what they wanted me to be, as well as making sure that my head is in the right space and my heart is in the right place. Because yeah, maybe I didn't turn out to be a doctor or a lawyer, but I graduated and I went into a field that I was really happy about. Like that was ultimately the motivating factor for it. Is just I wanted to get there and I wanted to show them that, hey, I did it. Because honestly, it's really tough to just be there and not have really any expectations, but knowing that the sky's the limit, because you don't want to, shoot for the stars and end up on the ground. Even though, your parents might, or my parents might have said, oh, you gave it your best shot. That does hold a weight to you, that's saying that, I do need to finish this. It's not just me getting here. It's about me finishing strong. Because at the end of the day, we were in school for 12, 13, 14 years before college. School doesn't necessarily change in college. It's just classes. It's just homework. It's just essays and the same thing that you do in high school, maybe at a higher level. But what does change is your freedom and the kind of headspace that you're in. Because when it's just you by yourself, you have to put a lot of attention to your mental health. Because if you don't, it'll eat you alive, because that pressure will get to you saying, I can't fail, I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't do this. It is a lot. And so taking care of your mental health and kind of using fear as motivation and doing anything that you possibly can to continue your drive and continue your passion. And, maybe it isn't for you at the end of the day, but as long as you can sit there and say, I gave it my all and I gave it everything. And usually when you do that, you will end up on top. You will end up graduating and you will end up happy because you gave it your all. And if you did and it wasn't for you, then it wasn't for you. But at least you can hang your head up or hold your head up high and say, I did it to the best of my ability and it just wasn't for me.
Thank you, Miguel. That is amazing. And thank you for being here today on our podcast and sharing your experiences and your family's stories with us. It truly means a lot. And I know that our listeners gained a lot of valuable tidbits from you today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again to today's guests, Aniya, Michael, and Miguel, for sharing their stories and experiences with our audience. And thank you for tuning into How to College for First Gens. After hearing from all of our guests today, you may have noticed that they experience various types of pressure at various points throughout their college journey, and for also a wide variety of reasons. It's important to be honest and to be self-reflective in the fact that first gens do experience some unique pressure being the first in their family to go to college. But it's also important for first generation students to remember that their mental health matters and that they can and will succeed. I hope that you take all of the lessons learned today from all of our guests and use it if you experience any sort of stress relating to family or societal pressure within your college journey. As always, you can find us online at howtocollegefirstgen.org if you have any questions or feedback, as we want to hear what you think, what you're struggling with, and how we can help. If you prefer to reach us on social media, you can find us at howtocollegefirstgen on Instagram and Facebook, as well as HTC First Gen on Twitter. Remember, you are not alone in this journey. Until next time.